Once upon a time, there were two evil stepsisters, an evil stepmother, and a distraught prince. The prince was looking for his love, so he brought a golden slipper with him to find her. The stepmother knew this and told the first stepsister to cut off her toe so that the shoe would fit. She did, and went to the prince, but the prince saw the blood on her shoe and sent her away. Then the stepmother told the other stepsister to cut off a part of her heel so that the shoe would fit. She did, and went to the prince, but the prince saw the blood on her shoe, knew she was a fake, and sent her away. This is taken from the Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, published by New York Barnes & Noble Books in 1993. It is the tale known to you as Cinderella.
All of us have heard the tale Cinderella, and many other tales, whether that's a bedtime story, a favorite movie, or even a favorite book.
The Grimm brothers' Gothic folktales live on today through their multiple adaptations.
First, we'll discuss the lives of the Grimm brothers. Second, the Gothic style of literature. Third, the tales the brothers wrote. And finally, the modern adaptations of the tales.
Literature was in the Grimm brothers' lives the entire time and influenced them in their writing. Jacob Karl Grimm was born January 4th, 1785 in Hanau, Germany. This is taken from Encyclopedia of World Biographies at notablebiographies.com, last updated the 30th of April in 2012. Jacob was very much into research, the study of language, and grammar. He later went on into his legal studies, which did not work out for him that well. Also taken from the Brothers Grimm biography at infoplease.com, last updated the 30th of April in 2012, Jacob came up with the Grimm's Law. This law is the representation of the shifting of consonants between Indo-European languages. For example, in America we say apple, where in Germany they would say Apfel.
Also, according to notablebiographies.com, Wilhelm Karl Jacob was born February 24th, 1786. And he, like his brother and father, was also trying to become a lawyer. He is much physically weaker than Jacob and was more interested in literature and music. And even though their stories have twisted themes and gruesome taglines, they tend to have happy endings and a pleasant side to them. And that was what Wilhelm was in charge of, because he liked his literature to be happy.
Now imagine living with your siblings for the rest of your life, pursuing the same career, living in the same house, even after they're married. In my opinion, that's kind of weird. But the two brothers lived side by side. Their legal studies did not last, however, due to their professor, Peter von Savini, who introduced to them national culture. The Romantic movement and their professor played a huge role in their interest in literature and folktales. The Romantic movement played a bigger role on the interest in folktales. With the help of the Romantic poets who already started collecting folktales, they had a bunch of folktales now. In Kassel, Germany, the two brothers became librarians, where Jacob became the head librarian and Wilhelm became his assistant. A few years later, they became professors at the University of Göttingen in Germany, but were kicked out after protesting against the king. After their troubles had subsided, they decided to write a dictionary, and they wanted every German word and the origin of the word included. And that was according to notablebiographies.com. After they passed away, scholars took the dictionary, and now there are 16 large volumes.
Now you keep hearing us say how literature was prevalent in the Grimm brothers' lives. With all of this literature, the Grimm brothers became interested in the Gothic style. The Gothic style of literature influenced the Grimm brothers' writings. And so, in order for us to make sure that we know how important this is, we need to know where the Gothic style of literature originated from. According to the online article Gothic Literature, written by Mel, which was copyrighted in 2007, Gothic style of literature was originated in the Romantic movement of the 19th century. That which we classify as Gothic is a subgenre of the Romantic movement. The Romantic movement was a movement of the arts, and it revolted against the political norms of the Age of Enlightenment. The movement also validated strong emotion and placed emphasis on the emotions of horror, terror, and awe. These emotions were then quickly encompassed in works which were shown in novels and in short stories. And since the Grimm brothers' lives were part of the Romantic movement, we then see these type of emotions in their writings.
Now, the Gothic style originates from Gothic churches. This is also taken from Mel's article, Gothic Literature. Now, these Gothic churches were built in Europe, with a Gothic architecture in mind. They were built high and straight to signify that we want to move up to the heavens. This accounts for all the uses of sublime and the senses in Gothic literature. It also accounts for the high amount of Catholicism that is prevalent in Gothic literature. Although it is in a negative fashion, because by the time Gothic literature was popular, the church was seen in a negative light.
There are many different elements of Gothic literature that Gothic writers used, like the Grimm brothers did. We will be talking about the 4 different elements. First, women in danger. Second, inexplicable events. Third, threatened women. And finally, mysterious atmosphere. According to the elements of the Gothic novel, last updated in 2011, states that women being in danger was huge because they were often put through events that left them terrified, screaming, fainting, or even crying. And also in these tales, there is normally the main character who is an oppressed heroine, and add that on top of the women events, that became the main focus of the tale. Also, women were abandoned, left alone, and without any protectors. And according to the Grimm's complete fairy tales, the Grimm brothers exemplify this in Snow White. Snow White was left alone, she was abandoned, and she didn't have any protectors.
Another element the Grimm brothers incorporated in their folktales was having supernatural or otherwise inexplicable events. And this is according to elements of the Gothic novel. And this is where dramatic or inexplainable events occur, such as ghosts, walking giants, or inanimate objects coming to life. Now, in most of their folktales, there is a natural explanation for these, but in some, they're just simply supernatural. And this is incorporated into their tale, Beauty and the Beast, where inanimate objects come to life, such as the candlestick, the pot, and not to mention the beast. And this is according to Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales.
A third tool of the Gothic style, as found on the elements of the Gothic novel, is having women be threatened by a powerful, impulsive, tyrannical male. This is when one or more of the male characters has the power, such as a king, a father, or a guardian. They demand that one of the female characters do something intolerable, like commit a crime or even marry someone she doesn't love. An example of this tool can be found in Rapunzel, taken from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, where Rapunzel's father keeps her locked away in a tower and demands that she stays there.
And finally, another element of Gothic literature is having an atmosphere of mystery and suspense. According to the article, Elements of the Gothic Novel, the work is encompassed by a threatening feeling and a fear of the unknown. The plot is also built around a mystery, this mystery either being a disappearance or an inexplicable event. The Grimm brothers' Complete Fairy Tales states that this is exemplified in the Grimm brothers' tale, Little Red Riding Hood, where Little Red Riding Hood is constantly in fear and feels threatened by the wolf. The 4 elements that we have just discussed were first, having women in danger, second, there being inexplicable events, third, women being threatened, and finally, there being a mysterious atmosphere. All of these exemplify the types of literature the Grimm brothers use in their writings.
The elements of the Gothic style of literature are greatly portrayed in the Grimm brothers' tales. Some examples of the Gothic style in general can be found in their tales, taken from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. He took a pair of shears and began to slit up the wolf's body. Out came the grandmother. The wolf's stomach was then filled with rocks and sewn back shut, so when he'd awake, he'd fall over dead. Little Red Riding Hood.
We will take the children early in the morning into the forest. Give each of them a piece of bread, go to our own work, and leave them alone. They will never find their way home again, and we will be rid of them. Hansel and Gretel.
The king's son climbed up the long hair. To his surprise, the witch was there. He leapt from the tower and escaped with his life. But the thorns on which he landed put out his eyes. Rapunzel.
I will give you all the riches in the world, if you promise me your daughter. But you must chop off her hands, for they are too pure. If you don't, you will take her place. So the daughter placed her hands upon the table, while her father chopped them off, the maiden without hands.
No, the devil told you my name was Rumpelstiltskin. In anger, he stomped with his right foot so hard it went through the ground above his right knee. He seized his left foot with such fury that he split into 2, Rumpelstiltskin.
You may be familiar with these tales because they are so popular. The Brothers Grimm's tales have lasting themes that are well known around the world. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm published the first edition called Children's and Household Tales in Germany in 1812. This information was taken from the Grimm Brothers homepage, copyrighted July 2010 by D.L. Ashleman, a University of Pittsburgh professor. Their first edition contained 86 tales. And now they kept writing and publishing more editions, and they added, subtracted, and edited stories until ultimately they created a 7th edition. And this 7th edition, according to the aforementioned source, contains 211 tales. And all of these tales, because, as we mentioned earlier, had the Gothic style because they were written in the Romantic movement. The Grimm brothers wanted these tales to be read by everyone and really successful because their whole goal was to preserve Germany's oral tradition. However, they found out that children weren't necessarily enthusiastic about the Gothic details in that style in general. So to make their content more suitable for children, the Grimm brothers had to soften and refine their tales. That way more children would read them. And to do this, a lot of sexual content had to be removed. According to the Guardians of the Fairy Tale, the Brothers Grimm, an article found on nationalgeographic.com, copyright 2000, one of the early versions of Rapunzel, she naively mentions her tight dress, implying her pregnant belly, which was a result of the king raping her. And I think we can all agree that if this kind of graphic content was kept in Rapunzel, our parents would not have been reading us and letting us watch this when we were children. Also, many of the characters were changed, that way they were more suitable for children. Wicked mothers were changed into stepmothers and witches. Incestuous fathers and kings were changed into devils. However, violence did increase, which is seen through eating of children, brutal deaths, and even torture, specifically towards villains.
The Grimm brothers' tales have questionable themes. According to the online article Grimm Brothers homepage, the tales were criticized because, as mentioned before, the collection was called Children's and Household Tales. However, this is extremely ironic because by no means were these tales suitable for children. Some of the common themes that were found throughout the Grimm brothers' works that were criticized include fear, discipline, and caution. These themes were meant to teach children valuable lessons, and they were served as warning tales. Part of the cruelty and violence found in these tales can be reflected back to the Gothic culture from which these tales originated from. And according to the National Geographic website, the Grimm brothers collection with these themes remain unmatched to anything else seen this day.
The Grimm's tales are renowned all over the world, this also taken from National Geographic. Such tales are famous, such as Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, and Rapunzel. Other tales, such as Snow White and Rumpelstiltskin, are right up there with them. Characters are constantly used from the Grimm's tales in literature today, such as dwarves, giants, stepmothers, witches, and so on. The Grimm's tales are translated into over 160 different languages, from Inuit in the Arctic to Swahili in Africa. In the US alone, there are over 120 different editions of the Grimm tales. The Grimm Folklore Collection is the most widespread and best-known literary work of German culture history in the world, next to the Luther Bible.
The brothers' influence lasted well beyond their years. Many modern adaptations have been taken from their tales, and a well-known one is Disney. We will be looking at, first, The Little Mermaid, second, Snow White, third, Sleeping Beauty, and finally, Rapunzel. And all of us have heard these stories, and we all heard about Disney, whether we wanted to be like a princess or even a prince. And according to the top 10 gruesome fairy tale origins, last copyrighted in 2009, states that the Grimm brothers came up with their Little Mermaid in 1836, and Disney came up with it in 1989. And in the Disney version, we all know that Ariel marries Prince Eric. However, in the Grimm version, she watches Eric marry another princess whom she despises. She's then offered a knife to kill Eric. However, she does not go through with the order and instead jumps into the ocean and dies by turning into froth.
Another folktale that Disney takes from the Grimm brothers is Snow White. According to History.com, Disney took all of the original parts of the story, but left out the gruesome parts. According to SirLaLoonFairyTales.com, it was written in the 19th century. In the Grimm's version, the queen tries to kill Snow White 3 different times and asks the huntsman to bring back her liver and lungs. But in the Disney version, the queen tries to kill her twice and asks the huntsman to bring back her heart. Another difference in the Disney version is that in the Grimm's version, the Snow White wakes up after being dropped by a dwarf carrying her coffin, and the apple dislodges from her throat, and the queen dies while dancing in red-hot iron shoes at Snow White's wedding. While in the Disney version, the queen, Snow White, wakes up from a kiss from a prince, and the queen dies by falling off a cliff.
Another story that Disney remade from the Grimm's version is Sleeping Beauty. In the version we know as Disney, Sleeping Beauty pricks her finger on a spinning wheel that's cursed. She then falls asleep and has to wait for a prince to slay a dragon, kiss her on the lips so she wakes up again. According to the story behind Sleeping Beauty, an article copyright 2009 by John Davis, a historian, the Grimm's version was a lot darker. In the Grimm's version, she's using the spinning wheel that's poisoned, and she then gets a splinter in her finger, and then she falls asleep because there's a poison splinter in her finger. And then while she's asleep, a king then comes and rapes her, still while she's asleep. Then 9 months later, she gives birth to 2 children. One of these babies then suck out the poisoned piece of splinter from her thumb, which causes her to wake up. So as you can see in the Disney version, that's a lot more kid-friendly and appropriate.
And finally, Rapunzel is another well-known tale that we have all either seen, read, or heard about from another person. According to the online article, The Origin and History of Rapunzel, which was copyrighted in 2009, Disney took the exact version of the Grimm brothers' last version of Rapunzel. And we can even see a more modern adaptation to the tale, which is the new Disney movie called Tangled. However, the Grimm brothers' first version of the tale was completely different. It was actually called St. Barbara, where St. Barbara was locked in a tower and became a Christian while she was there. When her father found out about this, he became extremely outraged, and he brought her to the Roman proconsul, where he ordered for her head to be cut off. Her father was going to follow these own orders, her own father, but was then punished by being struck by lightning and consumed by fire. So the 4 Disney adaptations that we have just talked about were Little Mermaid, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Rapunzel. And now let's look at some other modern adaptations that have been adapted from the Grimm brothers' tales.
There is, according to NBC.com, last updated in 2012, there's a TV series out there called Grimm, and it was first started in 2011 and is still going on today. And we have a video clip for you guys to watch of this TV series.
This preview showcases the TV show's perverted version of Little Red Riding Hood. This clip shows Nick's ability to see creatures lurking among us. Next, we go right back to Little Red Riding Hood. This unassuming mailman turns out to be, you guessed it, the big, bad wolf.
And as we can see in that clip, it really does show the Grimm brothers' tales, because we have Little Red Riding Hood, we have the mysterious atmosphere of her in the woods, we have her alone, and she is threatened by a man, the big bad wolf. And that's exactly how the Grimm brothers wanted it to be.
We first discussed the lives of the Grimm brothers. Second, the Gothic style of literature. Third, the Grimm brothers' tales, and finally the modern adaptations of the tales.
The Grimm brothers' Gothic style of literature lives on today through multiple adaptations.
And if you were wondering where Cinderella was in the beginning of our presentation, you can rest easy because she had a happily ever after with the prince, while her stepsisters got their eyes plucked out by pigeons. See? We told you they have happy endings.